appreciate the paranoia. The great ones do exactly what I say.
All right, so get this, Warped Tour is back.
Yeah, you just dust off those wristbands, dig out that old band tee from the back of your closet.
Yeah, we are diving back into the mosh pits of our youth. Well,
sort of.
kinda, right?
Yeah, not exactly the full-blown nationwide tour that we used to see.
Right.
This is more of a focused comeback.
Yeah.
3 cities, 2 days each.
Exactly.
Just a little taste.
Yeah. We're talking D.C. in June, then off to Long Beach in July,
Nice.
and finally wrapping things up in Orlando in November.
Sound fun.
And all the articles we're looking at today, they all make it clear this is a 30th anniversary celebration.
Oh, wow.
So get ready for a heavy dose of nostalgia,
Yeah.
a celebration of Warped Tour's legacy.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Warped Tour was the launching pad for so many huge bands.
I know.
You know, think Blink-182, Paramore, Fall Out Boy.
My Chemical Romance.
Yeah.
All of the greats.
For a whole generation, it was their first real concert experience.
Totally sweating it out in a parking lot, screaming along to your favorite bands.
Yep.
It was a rite of passage.
Definitely.
But here's where our deep dive takes a little bit of a turn.
Oh.
Because alongside all this excitement,
Yeah.
there's a darker side to Warped Tour's history that we can't ignore.
No.
And that, my friend, is the shadow of sexual misconduct allegations.
Yeah, that's important to address this right up front.
Yes.
Our sources today include some pretty powerful first-hand accounts from women who were actually there.
Right.
Some who played Warped Tour, some who just attended.
Yeah.
And their stories, they paint kind of a disturbing picture of what was happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, we're talking accusations against members of various bands, some even involving minors.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
It is.
It is.
Mariel Loveland,
Yeah.
who you might know from the band Candy Hearts, she talks about this culture of silence that just permeated the tour.
Really?
She describes this intense pressure on women to just be pleasant and brush things off,
Wow.
even in the face of harassment.
That's awful.
She even mentions bands openly saying they couldn't hire women because it would make their girlfriends or wives uncomfortable.
Oh, my God.
Can you believe that?
Wow.
And then there's Theo Kogan from Lunachicks.
Yeah, I know Lunachicks.
She recounts how some male bands treated their female fans, you know, like expecting them to like flash their breasts or throw bras on stage.
Yeah.
She calls it unsavory, which seems like an understatement to me.
Yeah.
And she emphasizes that this kind of behavior was basically accepted,
Wow.
even encouraged by the men in charge.
That's so gross.
So where does Kevin Lyman, the founder of Warped Tour, fit into all of this?
Yeah, where does he fit in?
Well, the articles dug up some of his past statements, and frankly, they're not great.
Oh.
Back in 2015, he said that Warped Tour doesn't tolerate artists who do wrong.
Okay.
But then he added this whole thing about needing proof.
Proof?
Like, what kind of proof do you need when there are all these women coming forward with their stories?
I don't know.
And then in 2017, he actually said that sexual misconduct was just part of the culture. Part of the culture.
What does that even mean?
That's a pretty weak excuse, if you ask me.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like he's trying to downplay the seriousness of the issue.
Yes.
And his response, or I guess lack thereof, raises kind of a crucial question.
What's that?
How much responsibility do festival organizers like Lyman actually have when it comes to creating a safe environment?
That's a good question.
Because, you know, it's not enough to just say you don't tolerate bad behavior.
Right.
You have to actively cultivate a culture where that kind of behavior doesn't even have a chance to take root.
Exactly. And it's not like Lyman didn't try to do something. The articles mention that he partnered with a few organizations to try and address the issue.
Oh, yeah, like who?
One of them was A Voice for the Innocent,
Okay.
which focuses on supporting survivors of sexual abuse.
Okay, so that partnership, at least on the surface, seems like a positive step.
It does.
It looks like they had two main goals.
Okay.
First, they wanted to educate bands on how to conduct themselves responsibly on tour.
So like setting some ground rules.
Right, exactly. And being like, hey, here's how you treat people with respect.
Right. To establish some clear expectations
Exactly.
before they even hit the road.
And their second goal was to create a space where survivors could actually share their stories
Right.
and access resources.
Which, considering that culture of silence that Mariel Loveland described,
Oh, yeah.
is incredibly important.
Definitely.
But the question is, did it actually make a difference?
Right.
And if so, how much of a difference? I mean,
Yeah.
the fact that they haven't announced any partnerships like that for this comeback tour is a little concerning, don't you think?
Yeah, it does make you wonder.
Yeah.
And then there's that whole thing with Ronnie Radke.
Oh, right, the frontman for Falling in Reverse.
Yeah, he's had his own share of accusations, hasn't he?
He has, and Lyman's public defense of Radke, even after all the controversy, didn't exactly inspire confidence.
Oh, no, it didn't.
It almost feels like a step backward.
Yeah, so while these partnerships with organizations like A Voice for the Innocent are important,
Yeah.
we have to ask, were they enough? And are we going to see a similar commitment to safety and accountability this time around?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And it's not just about what the organizers do, but about the overall culture of the event.
Right.
How do the bands behave? How do fans treat each other?
Yeah. Are people willing to speak up when they see something wrong?
It's a collective responsibility.
It is. And to understand that better, we need to rewind a bit back to 2017.
Okay.
Warped Tour took a pretty big step by bringing in an organization called Safer Scenes.
Safer Scenes?
Now, for those who aren't familiar, Safer Scenes specializes in training people to intervene
Okay.
when they witness harassment or assault.
So like empowering bystanders to become active participants in creating a safer environment.
Yes.
So what did Safer Scenes actually do at Warped Tour?
Well, they ran bystander intervention workshops throughout the tour.
Oh, interesting.
And Carolyn Ferdeber, the founder of Safer Scenes,
Okay.
she's quoted in one of the articles talking about just how badly those workshops were needed. She describes this like deeply ingrained sexist bro culture at Warped Tour,
Ugh.
where like hating women was somehow seen as this rebellious punk rock statement.
Oh my gosh.
It's honestly pretty shocking to hear.
It is, and it makes you wonder if that kind of mentality still exists within the Warped Tour community.
Yeah.
I mean, Ferdeber hasn't been invited back for the comeback tour,
Really?
at least not yet.
Mm.
So what does that tell us?
Yeah.
Are they serious about addressing these issues, or are they just hoping everyone will forget about the past and get caught up in the nostalgia?
That's a good question. And that brings us to you, the listener.
Yes.
Think about this. If you were heading to Warped Tour in 2025, what would make you feel safe?
What would you need to see from the organizers, from the bands, from your fellow fans?
Yeah. Would seeing Safer Scenes back on the lineup make you feel more comfortable?
Would you want to see a visible security presence, people trained to handle those harassment situations?
Yeah. What about a clear and accessible reporting system for anyone who experiences or witnesses something inappropriate?
These are all things to consider.
Because at the end of the day, the success of Warped Tour's comeback hinges on one crucial thing:
What's that?
creating a culture of safety and respect for everyone.
And that, my friend, requires a collective effort.
It does.
Now, while these concerns are critical, the comeback itself has some interesting elements.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
You will be interested to know that.
It actually involves a pretty big name in the festival world.
Okay.
Insomniac.
Insomniac?
You know the folks behind those massive EDM events?
Oh,
Like Electric Daisy Carnival?
wait, really? That's a huge shift?
Yeah.
I mean, Warped Tour and EDC, those are like two totally different worlds.
I know, right?
What's the thinking there?
It seems pretty strategic, actually.
Okay.
Insomniac has the experience and infrastructure to pull off these huge multi-day festivals.
Right.
They've got the logistics down to a science.
Okay, that makes sense.
You know, they're pros at handling the crowds, the stages, all of that.
Right. But what about the vibe?
Yeah.
Insomniac's events are known for like a very specific aesthetic, a very specific energy.
Yeah.
How does that match with the whole punk rock ethos of Warped Tour?
That is a great question.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's one of the most fascinating aspects of this whole comeback.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how those two worlds collide, how they influence each other.
Yeah.
Will we see like a more polished, more produced version of Warped Tour? Or will that raw DIY spirit of punk rock shine through?
I'm kind of picturing mosh pits with lasers and confetti cannons.
I know, right?
It's a weird mental image, but I'm not totally opposed to it.
It's going to be a unique experience for sure.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, this partnership could be a way to bring in a whole new audience.
Oh, yeah.
People who grew up on EDM festivals, they might be curious to check out Warped Tour now.
Right now that it has the Insomniac stamp of approval, it's like they're trying to bridge the gap between generations, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so too.
And speaking of generations, there's another aspect of the comeback that caught my eye.
What's that?
The ticket prices.
Oh, yeah.
They're significantly lower than a lot of the other nostalgia-driven festivals out there.
Yeah, that's true. Lyman actually talks about this in one of the articles.
Okay.
He's really proud of the fact that they've managed to keep those ticket prices relatively affordable.
That's awesome.
He even mentions that some bands had to push back against their own management teams
Really?
to play Warped Tour because, let's face it, it's not as financially lucrative as some other gigs out there.
So what's the motivation there?
Yeah.
Why not charge more, especially if these nostalgia acts are in such high demand?
It seems like there's a sense of idealism at play here. A desire to make Warped Tour accessible to as many people as possible.
I see.
Lemon talks about wanting to give young music fans the same experience he had. The same chance to discover new bands and connect with other people who share their passion for music.
I get that there's something special about that shared experience, that sense of community you get at a festival like Warped Tour.
Absolutely.
But if we're being honest, that sense of community only works if everyone feels safe and respected, right?
100%. And that brings us back to the issue of accountability.
It does.
One of the articles quotes Lymans saying that making a community strong can't be just an individual thing. It takes everyone out there.
And he's right. It's not enough for the organizers to just say they're committed to safety.
Right.
They have to back that up with concrete actions.
So what does that look like in practice?
Yeah. What specific steps can they take to create that culture of safety and accountability?
Well, for starters, it means being really selective about which bands they invite to play.
Okay.
They need to do their due diligence, look into the backgrounds of these bands.
Right.
And make sure they're not bringing in anyone with a history of problematic behavior.
Okay, that makes sense. But even if they vet the bands thoroughly, there's still the issue of fan behavior.
That's true.
How do they address that?
That's where bystander intervention comes in.
Right.
Remember Safer Scenes?
Yeah.
They were brought in back in 2017 to run those workshops, teaching people how to step in when they see something wrong.
Right. It's about empowering people to say something, to intervene, rather than just standing by and letting it happen.
Exactly.
But like we talked about earlier, Safer Scenes isn't involved in the comeback tour, at least not yet.
Right.
So how do they plan to keep that focus on bystander intervention going?
That's a great question, and honestly, it's one that deserves an answer.
Yeah.
If they're serious about creating a safer environment, they need to have a plan in place, a strategy for educating fans about bystander intervention and empowering them to take action.
Maybe they could partner with another organization,
Yeah.
or maybe they could incorporate it into the festival itself somehow, like have information booths or announcements on the stages.
Yeah.
Or even just signs around the venue reminding people that they have a role to play in keeping everyone safe.
Those are all great ideas.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just telling people what not to do.
Right.
It's about promoting positive behaviors, highlighting the importance of consent, and creating a space where everyone feels comfortable speaking up if they see something that's not right.
It's about creating a culture of respect, not just a culture of fear.
Exactly. And that culture of respect needs to extend to everyone involved.
Yeah.
From the headlining bands to the volunteers working the merch booths.
Right. Everyone has a role to play in shaping the environment of the festival.
Everyone.
It's like we said earlier, it's a collective responsibility, but it's also important to acknowledge that we're not just talking about preventing bad things from happening. We're also talking about creating a positive, inclusive, and empowering experience for everyone who attends.
Right. Think about it this way.
Okay.
If you were an artist invited to play Warped Tour 2025, what questions would you ask the organizers? To ensure the safety of both the performers and the fans, what kind of assurances would you need?
I'd want to know what policies and procedures they have in place to handle harassment or assault allegations.
Okay.
What kind of training does their staff receive? How do they plan to communicate their commitment to safety to the fans?
Exactly. And if you were planning to attend Warped Tour, what would you want to see?
I'd want to see a visible presence of security personnel who are trained to handle these kinds of situations.
Okay.
I'd want to know that there's a clear and accessible reporting system in place.
Yeah.
And that any reports will be taken seriously and investigated thoroughly.
Those are all essential elements of creating a safe and accountable environment.
Yes.
And it's not just about protecting people from harm. It's also about fostering a sense of community, a sense of belonging, where everyone feels valued and respected.
And that brings us to another interesting aspect of this whole Warped Tour comeback.
What's that?
It's not just about reliving the past, it's also about looking ahead to the future.
Right. One of the articles mentions that Lyman is really interested in showcasing new bands,
Oh, cool.
in giving up-and-coming artists a platform to share their music with a wider audience.
That's always been a huge part of Warped Tour's identity, that commitment to discovering and supporting new talent.
It has, and it'll be fascinating to see how that aspect of the festival evolves in this new iteration.
Yeah.
What kind of new bands will they book?
What kind of sound will they be looking for?
Yeah, will they continue to champion the punk rock ethos, or will we see a more diverse range of genres represented?
And what about the fans?
Yeah.
Will we see a new generation of Warped Tour devotees emerge?
Right.
Or will it mostly be the old guard coming back for a dose of nostalgia?
It's hard to say for sure, but one thing is certain.
What's that?
The landscape of the music industry has changed drastically since Warped Tour went on hiatus.
For sure.
Streaming services have taken over. Social media plays a huge role in how we discover and consume music. And the whole concept of a scene feels a lot more fluid and fragmented than it used to be.
So how does Warped Tour fit into that new landscape?
Yeah.
Can they reclaim their relevance, or are they destined to become a relic of a bygone era? I guess we'll have to wait and see.
I think we will, but I think one thing is for sure.
Okay.
This comeback is about more than just the music.
Yeah.
It's about community. It's about nostalgia. And it's about grappling with some pretty complex issues that have plagued the music industry for far too long.
It's about acknowledging the past, learning from it, and working towards a better future.
Exactly. And that's something worth thinking about, no matter what your relationship to Warped Tour might be.
Yeah, it feels like Warped Tour is at this crossroads, trying to figure out how to honor its legacy
Right.
while also adapting to a completely different world.
Right.
And honestly, that makes this comeback even more interesting to me.
Yeah, I agree. And what's fascinating is that the articles also touch on, the business side of this whole thing.
Right.
Because, let's be real, nostalgia alone doesn't guarantee success.
Yeah.
They need to make this thing viable.
Right.
And that means, really understanding the modern music landscape.
Yeah, one article pointed out that ticket prices for Warped Tour are way lower than some other nostalgia-driven festivals out there.
Way lower.
Like, when we were Young Fest, that emo mega fest,
Yeah.
those tickets were going for hundreds of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
Hundreds.
Yeah, that's true. And Lyman seems pretty adamant about keeping Warped Tour relatively affordable.
Yeah.
He even said some bands had to push back against their own teams to play Warped
Really?
because it's not as financially lucrative as some other options out there.
So what's the motivation there? Why not try to cash in on the nostalgia craze and
Yeah.
charge a premium?
It seems like there's this genuine desire to make Warped accessible to a younger generation.
Yeah.
To give kids who might not have a ton of money a chance to experience this thing
Right.
that was so formative for so many people.
Yeah, I like that it's about keeping the spirit of Warped alive.
Yeah.
Making it more than just a cash grab.
Exactly. And it plays into this idea that Warped Tour represents something bigger than just the music.
Yeah.
It's about community.
Mm-hmm.
It's about discovery. And it's about creating this space where people can come together and feel like they belong.
But as we've been discussing, that sense of community only works if everyone feels safe and respected.
Absolutely.
And that's the challenge Warped Tour's facing, right?
Yeah.
How to reconcile its past with its future.
Right, yeah.
How to create an environment that's truly inclusive and welcoming for everyone.
And it's not an easy challenge.
No.
It requires a willingness to acknowledge the mistakes that were made,
Right.
to learn from them,
Yeah.
and to actively work towards creating something better.
And it requires a collective effort.
Yeah.
It's not just up to the organizers or the bands or the fans. It's
Cool.
up to all of us to create the kind of Warped Tour we want to see.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
we want to leave you with a question to ponder.
Okay, hit me.
If you were part of the Warped Tour community,
Yeah.
what role would you play in shaping its future?
Mm-hmm.
Would you be the artist who speaks out against harassment?
Oh, yeah.
The fan who steps in when they see something wrong?
Right.
The organizer who prioritizes safety and accountability above all else?
Because ultimately the future of Warped Tour isn't just about reliving the past. It's about creating something new, something that reflects our values and aspirations, something that we can all be proud of.
I think that's a great note to end on.
I think so too. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive into Warped Tour's comeback.
This was fun.
It was. We'll see you next time.